Hello. Shalom everyone, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan here. We are live on the official IDF Facebook page. We are in Sderot, which some of you may know, some of you won't, so I'll tell you what this is. We're in a city in southern Israel, which is very close, just a few miles from the Gaza Strip. And the reason we are filming live from a playground, which is what you can see behind me, is that in this specific playground, and you can see the damage behind me, a rocket was fired from Gaza and exploded here just a few hours ago. This rocket is one of more than 40 rockets, 40 rockets that have been fired from Gaza towards Israel by the Islamic Jihad, a Palestinian terrorist organization that is from the Gaza Strip, which has been firing more than 40 rockets from Gaza into Israel over the last 24 hours. In retaliation, we have responded with attacking military targets that belong to that specific terrorist organization, the Islamic Jihad. And we have also, for the first time in quite a lot of time, attacked terror infrastructure in Damascus, Syria, a few hundred miles away, because it's the same terror organization that is operating from Syria with Iranian support, and then from Gaza firing rockets at Israeli civilians. In retaliation, we have struck military targets inside Gaza, and as we speak, just a few minutes ago, rockets were fired again by the Islamic Jihad from Gaza towards Israel. An alarm may go off as we are broadcasting live. I hope it won't, but if it will, we will take the necessary precautions. Now, how did this all start? It started actually more than 24 hours ago, when the early hours of Sunday morning, around 6 a.m., 6 a.m., there were two Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists that were trying to infiltrate to Israel and place an improvised explosive device, basically a bomb, along the border in order to hit an Israeli patrol and kill Israeli soldiers. We spotted that attempt, and if you've been watching our Facebook and Twitter feed, you can see the original intelligence movie that we filmed of the two operatives trying to get towards the fence, placing the IED, and then afterwards we were able to kill one of them, and the second one was wounded and evacuated back into Gaza. Since then, the Islamic Jihad has been firing rockets almost relentlessly from Gaza at Israel, and we have been retaliating against military targets inside Gaza. Now, you may ask, where do we go from here? Where does this leave us, and where do we go from here? As I just said, we've had, just a few minutes ago, rockets again fired from Gaza at Israel, so it is clear that the Islamic Jihad inside Gaza continues to fire rockets at Israel, so we are still in an active conflict ongoing between Israel and the Islamic Jihad. Where do we go from here? I can tell you that from our perspective, the IDF perspective, we are ready, prepared and equipped to continue to defend Israeli civilians, to continue to defend Israeli sovereignty. We're happy about the fact that so far there are no Israeli casualties, but that is not something that we can take for granted. So as long as Islamic Jihad and other terrorist organizations threaten Israeli civilians, they will be met with a strong Israeli military response against those terrorists. We will attack the terrorists. We will try to do so while minimizing collateral damage and while making sure that as few as possible people that are not involved in combat are affected. But we cannot guarantee that. And the bottom line is that the terrorist organizations in Gaza are using the Gazan civilians as human shields while they're firing rockets at our civilians. So kind of like a double war crime. One, using their civilians as human shields, and the second thing, firing their rockets at Israeli civilians. As you can see, we're standing in a playground, and one of those more than 40 rockets that were fired from Gaza landed here, fortunately, with no casualties. So I'll give you a short recap of the last 24 hours. For those of you who are joining now to our live broadcast, we are on the official IDF Facebook page. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan. We are standing in Sderot, which is an Israeli city close to the Gaza border, just a few miles away. The last 24 hours, the Islamic Jihad, a Palestinian terrorist organization, has been firing more than 40 rockets from Gaza into Israel with the aim of killing Israeli civilians. It is indiscriminate fire that is specifically targeting Israeli civilians, something of course that we cannot tolerate. So far, the Israeli defense systems, the Iron Dome, has been very effective, continues to protect our civilians, and I'm happy to say that so far there have not been any Israeli casualties. That, of course, is not something that we can take for granted, because no defense, no matter how excellent, and the Iron Dome is excellent, cannot be 100% sure. And the message to the Islamic Jihad is that if they'll continue to fire, they will be met with a very strong response. The IDF is ready, committed and equipped to respond against them, and if we should need to do so, we will continue to do so, since it is they who are aggressing against us. So it's been so far a very violent 24 hours, and we're looking forward to de-escalating the situation, but we are ready to continue to defend our civilians if it should be necessary, and if the Islamic Jihad doesn't stop firing rockets at our civilians. Let's see if there's any questions from people in the audience. I see a lot of feedback. That's great. I thank you for a lot of good things, that a lot of blessings, and shalom and God bless. That's great to see. And yes, we are strong and happy to do our duty. There's a question here about who funds the Islamic Jihad. The Islamic Jihad is a Sunni terrorist organization that is funded almost totally by Iran, by the Shiite, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is a country that supports terrorism around the Middle East. And the Islamic Jihad inside Gaza is the organization that receives almost 90% of its entire budget comes from Iran. Almost all of the weapons that they use comes from Iran. And for sure, some of the rockets that have been fired were either manufactured in Iran or were paid for with Iranian money. So regarding the question of who the Islamic Jihad is and who funds them, that's the answer. A lot of it is related to Iran, and we can see, like many other places around the Middle East, Iranian fingerprints all over that area. Let's see if there are other questions. So I spoke about that before. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here depends on what the terrorists in Gaza understand. If they understand that they cannot continue firing at Israel, and that we will meet their attacks with a very strong military response, then probably the situation will be able to de-escalate and calm down. If the terrorists on the other side continue to fire at Israel, Israel will be left with no other option but to continue our response to defend our civilians and our sovereignty, which is currently under attack by a terrorist organization inside Gaza, firing rockets at our civilians. And as I said before, over the last 24 hours, there have been more than 40 rockets fired from Gaza into Israel. So I think that with that, maybe we'll take one last question before we break off. There's a question here about how does it feel to defend Israel, and I'm only a spokesperson, but I can say on behalf of all of the brave men and women who serve in the IDF and defend Israel, whether it is the infantry soldiers, the soldiers in the armored corps, artillery, the Air Force, the Iron Dome, intelligence or cyber, we are proud, happy, capable and committed to continue to defend our homeland, to continue to defend Israeli civilians. That is our duty, and we do it with the biggest sense of pride and responsibility that we can. And we really appreciate, and it's actually great to see, we really appreciate all of the support from around the world that is flowing in on our feed right now, and that we are getting from other places worldwide. So thank you for tuning in. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan. We are live in Sderot. Hopefully the next update will be of a more calm situation, but you never know. I can assure you that we are ready and prepared for every eventuality. Thank you and shalom.